There I was, nursing my morning coffee when 3 squad cars rolled into my driveway. The steam from the cup curled against the cool air, mixing with the low rumble of engines that didn't belong. Turns out, HOA President Karen Whitfield had dialed 911 on me for the crime of daring to own the old mill lake I'd bought fair and square. The bitter scent of over-roasted coffee tangled with exhaust fumes as she strutted out of her white BMW, sunglasses flashing like armor, heels crunching the gravel with all the grace of a coronation march. She thought she was queen of Willowbrook Heights, the ruler of cul-de-sacs and mailboxes. What she didn't know was that her 6-year reign of intimidation was about to collapse. Right under those designer heels, what she missed, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that I'd already begun, peeling back the layers of her little empire. Behind her manicured smile and perfect HOA newsletters was a tangled web of lies. A massive fraud scheme siphoning thousands in lake maintenance fees for property that didn't even belong to them. She'd been bleeding honest families dry while filing bogus police reports and bullying anyone who dared to question her. But she didn't realize she'd finally messed with the wrong man. I'm an electrician by trade, someone who knows how to trace a bad connection all the way to the source. And I was about to expose every single wire in her corrupt system until her whole operation short-circuited in public view. Before I get into exactly how I dismantled her scam, though, I've got to ask, what would you do if your HOA tried to swipe your land? Drop your story and location in the comments below, because this isn't just my fight. It's every homeowner's nightmare. Now, let me rewind and show you how this mess began. 6 months ago, I was Marcus Del Valle, 52 years old, an electrician still nursing the sting of the worst divorce since Henry VIII. My studio apartment smelled like old takeout and other people's bad decisions. Then came Uncle Tony's passing, and with it, one last surprise from the old man, $180,000 and the chance to start fresh. I spent weeks looking for a place that didn't come with shared walls or HOA drama, and that's when I found the Hartwell Mill property. 3 acres of forgotten paradise, complete with a pristine lake, a weathered century-old mill, and a cabin that felt like something carved from another time. The air there smelled like sawdust and rusted iron, like ghosts of honest labor still lingered in the beams. And for $165,000, I bought my slice of heaven outright. What I didn't realize was that I'd also bought front-row seats to the Karen Whitfield show. See? Willowbrook Heights HOA had been treating Old Mill Lake as their private resort for the past 15 years. Barbecues, paddle boats, fireworks, the works. 47 homes, each paying nearly $900 a month in HOA dues, and somehow they'd convinced themselves that traditional access meant ownership. The laughter of children drifting across the water might have been charming if it wasn't echoing off my property. And then came Karen. Imagine a woman who could make a military drill instructor look diplomatic. Then multiply that by 6 years of unchecked authority. At 48, she ran the HOA unopposed because no one else wanted the headache. Her husband Brad drove a BMW that appeared in more Facebook photos than their kids. And their $750K lakeside home had the perfect view, which in Karen's mind meant she owned everything she could see from her marble countertops. Week 2 on the property, I learned exactly who I was dealing with. Her voice sliced across the lake like a buzzsaw. "We need to discuss your responsibilities to the community," she said, marching onto my land with 3 board members trailing behind her like underpaid bodyguards. Responsibilities? I'd barely figured out which key unlocked the front door. She handed me a homemade contract so ridiculous it could have been pulled straight from a medieval tax scroll, claiming I was responsible for maintaining their boat ramp, stocking fish, repairing docks, and, my personal favorite, covering liability insurance for every trespasser who set foot on my land. "This lake has always been for everyone," she said with the smug assurance of someone who'd never been told no. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my tone even, "I own this property. Check the deed." Her smile hardened into something glacial. "We'll see about that." I made the mistake of trying to be diplomatic. "Look, maybe we can work something out once I'm settled." She heard "work something out" and smelled weakness. The next morning, my answer arrived in the form of beer cans, cigarette butts, and a used diaper floating beside my dock. The lake water shimmered gold under the sunrise, but all I could smell was arrogance. So I did what any sensible man would do. I installed cameras. Just a few, nothing fancy. Enough to prove who was treating my property like a public landfill. The sound of my drill echoed across the still water, and I swear I could feel Karen's fury boiling from her kitchen window. Within hours, she was back, heels clicking, finger jabbing toward my cameras. "This surveillance harassment of families is completely unacceptable," she shrieked like I'd planted spy satellites. "Children play here. Children play on my private property, I corrected. Maybe they should play somewhere their parents actually own. Karen's face went through more color changes than a traffic light. You haven't heard the last of this. As she stormed off down the gravel, I knew this wasn't about neighborly misunderstandings anymore. This was about power, and Karen Whitfield wasn't used to being challenged. She genuinely believed that 15 years of trespassing had rewritten property law in her favor. But she'd just picked the wrong target. She'd picked a man who understood systems, pressure, and resistance. And she was about to find out what happens when you mess with an electrician who knows how to shut the power off at the main breaker. Her retaliation came fast. Within 48 hours, my mailbox looked like it had been hit by a bureaucratic tornado. 14 separate code violations, each one more absurd than the last. Unpermitted dock repair for hammering 3 loose boards. Illegal signage because my security camera's in use. Warning was too intimidating. Even a noise violation for running my generator past 8 p.m. Apparently the hum of survival disturbed the community's tranquility. Every morning, the smell of fresh citation paper mixed with my bitter coffee. But here's where Karen slipped. She moved too quickly. County enforcement never moves fast unless someone's pulling strings. And sure enough, I noticed a pattern. Every complaint came from the same supervisor. Rick Donovan, Tuesday, 9:47 a.m. My cameras caught Karen's silver BMW parked outside the Starbucks on Maple Street. At 9:52, Rick Donovan's county truck rolled up. They sat for 30 minutes, leaning close over paperwork like spies trading secrets. Rick even paid for her caramel macchiato. Real subtle. My Uncle Tony used to say, when the government moves fast, follow the money or the heart. This time, it was the heart. Turns out, Karen and Rick had been seeing each other for 8 months. His messy divorce had finalized last year, and Karen had swept in as his midlife crisis makeover. Time to fight fire with paperwork. Back in my union days, I learned one thing. Nothing scares public officials more than transparency. So I filed a Freedom of Information Act request. Cost me $47 and a few hours of patience. But what I got back was pure gold. 17 emails between Karen and Rick, including lines like, "Can we expedite the Delveo situation?" And "What other municipal violations can we explore?" One especially damning message ended with, "Let's meet at our usual spot to discuss additional pressure points." Nothing says conflict of interest like pillow talk with the code enforcement supervisor. While Rick was busy writing citations for imaginary violations, I hired a professional surveyor to establish the truth about my property boundaries. The sharp snap of measuring tape echoed across my land as we marked every inch. Years ago, when I'd helped my cousin fight a neighbor's fence dispute, I learned that most property arguments come down to one simple question. Who actually owns what? Thursults made Karen's face go whiter than fresh paint. Her traditional boat ramp wasn't just on my property. It was 8 ft on my land, their precious community dock, another 4 ft of pure trespassing. And here's the kicker I remembered from my cousin's case. You need 20 years of continuous use to claim someone else's property through adverse possession. Karen's crew had only been trespassing for 15 years, which meant they had 0 legal claim to my land. When those bright orange survey stakes went up, marking my actual property lines, Karen's reaction was like watching someone bite into a lemon-flavored pickle. The crunch of gravel under her furious march back to her BMW sounded like grinding teeth. That evening, she called an emergency HOA board meeting. I wasn't invited, but my neighbor Frank Kowalski, a retired sheriff's deputy who missed exactly nothing, gave me the highlight reel. "This newcomer is destroying our community values," Karen had shrieked, pacing the community center like a caged tiger. "We cannot let some blue-collar nobody waltz in here and steal what rightfully belongs to this community." Even her loyal board members were shifting, uncomfortably. When you start calling emergency meetings about property lines, people begin questioning whether you're fighting for the community or just feeding your own ego. But Karen wasn't done. Her next move revealed just how deep her sense of entitlement ran. 3 days after my survey stakes appeared, I got a visit from Sheriff's Deputy Mike Whitfield. Yes, Whitfield, Karen's brother-in-law. Small towns are funny that way, aren't they? Mr. Delveo had drawled, thumbs hooked in his belt like some budget Wyatt Herp. "We've been getting complaints about you harassing residents." "Harassing residents? I haven't left my property in 3 days." "Well, some folks feel intimidated by all those cameras you got pointed at the lake. The cameras that were clearly focused on my own dock and shoreline, documenting the ongoing trespassing. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Deputy, those cameras are on my property recording my property. If people feel intimidated, maybe they should stop trespassing." His jaw tightened. "Just saying." Might be wise to be more neighborly. Wouldn't want any misunderstandings. The threat hung in the air like summer humidity. Karen had just escalated from petty harassment to abuse of law enforcement, using family connections to intimidate me. But she'd also made a critical tactical error. She'd brought a badge into what should have been a civil property dispute. That night, I started a detailed log of every interaction, every violation notice, every friendly visit from Karen's relatives in uniform. Because when a system starts overloading, you document exactly where the faults are occurring before the whole thing blows. Karen's next move proved she'd been taking notes from every petty dictator in history. If you can't beat them legally, exhaust them with badges and sirens. It started at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. My phone rang with that jarring sound that means either someone died or someone's about to. Instead, it was the thunder of patrol cars screaming down my driveway because Karen had reported a break-in in progress at my mill. 4 deputies, weapons drawn, surrounded my building while I stood there in my underwear, trying to explain that yes, I was supposed to be here. The red and blue light strobing through my windows mixed with the metallic taste of adrenaline as I realized Karen had just weaponized the entire sheriff's department. "Ma'am called about suspicious vehicles and break-in noises," Deputy Martinez explained, holstering his weapon and looking embarrassed. "This is the 3rd call this week." "3rd call? I've been working late exactly 3 times rewiring electrical panels that hadn't been updated since Carter was president. Unless improving 40-year-old circuit breakers was now a felony." Karen was filing false reports faster than a telemarketer. But 3 a.m. wake-up calls were just her opening act. Over the next 2 weeks, Karen called police claiming I was operating an illegal business. I'd fixed a neighbor's porch light, endangering children. Apparently, kids could see my threatening property from the road, stockpiling weapons. My toolbox looked suspicious. And my personal favorite, possible terrorist activities. Because I'd ordered Chinese takeout twice in 1 week. The harassment campaign might have worked on someone else, but Karen had made one critical error. She'd underestimated my neighbor, Frank Kowalski. Frank had retired after 30 years with the sheriff's department, and watching Karen's systematic abuse of emergency services was making his cop instinct scream. Over coffee on my dock with the morning mist rising off the water like ghosts of common sense, he dropped some knowledge that changed everything. "Son, I've seen this exact pattern before," Frank said, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug. "She's not trying to arrest you. She's trying to break you. Make you think fighting back costs more than giving up." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What she doesn't realize is that filing false police reports is a criminal offense. But you need rock-solid documentation to prove intent." That's when Frank offered something invaluable, his connections. Within 48 hours, he'd pulled Karen's complete history with the department, and what we found made my stomach turn. 47 false reports in 3 years. 47. Karen hadn't just been harassing me. She'd been systematically targeting anyone who threatened her control. A Hispanic landscaper who dared to park his truck on the street. An elderly widow whose bird feeders attracted too many animals. A young military couple whose motorcycle was disturbing the peace. But here's the kicker that made my blood boil. The department knew. Every supervisor, every desk sergeant, every dispatcher knew Karen Whitfield was abusing the system. But they'd never prosecuted because her victims always gave up and moved away before building a case. "She's got A-type," Frank explained, spreading the reports across my kitchen table. "Anyone who doesn't fit her vision of the perfect community, poor, minority, military, working class. She's been running an ethnic cleansing campaign disguised as neighborhood watch. The discrimination pattern was so obvious, it might as well have been written in neon. Karen wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a racist using law enforcement to terrorize people she considered undesirable. That revelation hit me like touching a live wire. This wasn't about lake excess anymore. This was about a privileged woman using systemic authority to crush anyone who didn't kiss her ring. But Karen's harassment campaign was about to backfire spectacularly because she just made her biggest mistake yet, harassing someone with documentation skills and police connections. I started recording every interaction with law enforcement, completely legal in my state under one-party consent laws. When I informed Deputy Mike Whitfield of this during his next wellness check, his reaction was like watching a circuit breaker trip. His face went from confident tan to the color of old putty. "You can't record police officers," he protested. "Actually, Mike, I can. One-party consent state. Maybe your sister-in-law should have mentioned that during your strategy sessions." The look in his eyes told me I'd hit a nerve bigger than I'd imagined. Frank filed the internal affairs complaint that Friday. By Monday, Deputy Mike was being called in for a routine interview about his response patterns to certain addresses. Turns out my harassment case was exactly the evidence internal affairs needed to investigate what they'd suspected for months. Karen had compromised a sworn officer. Karen's police harassment campaign had just collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane, but I was about to learn that a cornered predator becomes infinitely more dangerous, because Karen Whitfield's next move would cross a line that even she couldn't uncross. With her police harassment scheme crumbling faster than week-old cookies, Karen decided to bring out the big guns, literally and figuratively. Her husband Brad, the personal injury lawyer with a BMW payment bigger than most people's rent, delivered a cease and desist letter that arrived like a legal hand grenade. The thick cream-colored papers smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. According to Brad's legal masterpiece, I was violating established easement rights and community covenants that supersede individual property ownership. The kicker, he was threatening a $50,000 lawsuit for lost property values and emotional distress caused by hostile surveillance and exclusionary tactics. Emotional distress from the woman who'd been filing false police reports like she was collecting baseball cards. But Brad's legal threat was actually a gift because it gave me the perfect excuse to do something I'd been itching to do since day one: follow the paper trail. Back in my union days, I'd seen enough contract disputes to know that the devil's always in the details. So, I dropped $400 on legal database access, the same resources lawyers use, and started digging into my property's history. 3 days later, I struck legal gold that would have made a prospector weep with joy. The original mill property had been subdivided in 1987 by developer James Morrison. But there's where it gets beautiful. Morrison had specifically retained all lake access rights for the mill property in the subdivision documents. Every single home in Willowbrook Heights was sold with deed restrictions that explicitly acknowledged the mill owner's exclusive lake rights. But wait, it gets better. Guess who had helped write those original HOA formation documents back in 1987? A young lawyer named Bradley Whitfield, fresh out of law school and working for Morrison's firm. Brad had literally helped create the legal framework that gave me exclusive lake access, then spent 15 years helping his wife violate it. The irony was so delicious, I could taste it like perfectly aged wine. That's when I knew I needed professional help. Rebecca Rowan's law office smelled like leather-bound books and fresh determination when I walked in with my box of evidence. Her eyes lit up like an electrician finding a short circuit with a thermal camera. "Marcus, this is extraordinary," she said, spreading documents across her mahogany desk. "Not only do you have exclusive lake access, but the HOA has been operating in direct violation of their own founding documents for over a decade." Rebecca discovered something even more damaging during her investigation. The HOA's liability insurance was completely void for any accidents on my property. They'd never disclosed their informal arrangements to their insurance company, which meant every family barbecue, every kid jumping off the dock, every beer-soaked boat party had been happening without coverage. One slip and fall lawsuit would bankrupt the entire HOA, Rebecca explained. The weight of that revelation settling over us like morning fog. Their insurance company would deny the claim and probably sue them for fraud. While Rebecca was building our legal case, my informal intelligence network was providing equally valuable intelligence. 3 neighbors had quietly approached me with their own care and horror stories, and the pattern was chilling. The family with the disabled child whose pool therapy sessions were deemed too noisy. The veteran with PTSD who got cited for fireworks violations during a 4th of July gathering that included exactly 0 fireworks. The elderly couple whose bird feeders attracted vermin that were allegedly lowering property values. Each story painted the same picture. Karen systematically targeted anyone who couldn't fight back or anyone who threatened her vision of the perfect community. But this time she'd picked on someone with the resources, documentation skills, and sheer stubbornness to fight back. Rebecca's strategy was surgical in its precision. "Give them one final chance to negotiate," she advised. "Sometimes the threat of legal action is more powerful than the action itself. Let them hang themselves with their own arrogance." So I called Karen and offered to meet with the full HOA board to discuss a reasonable compromise. The smugness dripping from her voice was like listening to nails on a chalkboard dipped in honey. "Finally, some common sense," she practically purred. "I knew you'd eventually see reason and do what's best for the community." The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community center. All 5 board members would attend, plus Karen as president. I'd present my proposal for shared lake access, and we'd work out the details like civilized people. What Karen didn't know was that the tiny digital recorder in my shirt pocket would capture every word of what was about to unfold. Frank Kowalski agreed to attend as my neutral observer, mainly because he wanted a front-row seat to what he suspected would be Karen's public execution. The stage was set. Karen thought she was walking into a surrender ceremony where I'd finally bow to her authority and sign over access to my lake. Instead, she was about to walk into a legal ambush that would end her 6-year reign of terror forever. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply letting people destroy themselves with their own arrogance. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of tension that makes your skin crawl. The community center conference room rire of industrial disinfectant and nervous sweat as all 5 HOA board members filed in, followed by Karen Struding like a general reviewing troops. I arrived with my briefcase and the quiet confidence of someone holding a royal flush. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps as Karen launched into her opening performance. Mr. Delveo, this is your opportunity to be a good neighbor and do what's right for our community, she announced, clicking through PowerPoint slides that included architectural plans for an expanded boat dock and picnic area. We're prepared to be generous. A simple easement agreement for traditional lake access, and we'll even contribute to maintenance. The board members nodded like trained seals clearly rehearsed in this little theater. But I caught board treasurer Janet Morrison's nervous glance toward the exit. She smelled the trap coming. Before we discuss easements, I said, my briefcase clicking open like a loaded weapon. Let's talk about theft. Karen's practiced smile flickered like a dying light bulb. Excuse me? I pulled out the original HOA formation documents, their edge paper crackling in the silence. These are your founding documents from 1987, Karen. The ones your husband helped write when he was Brad Whitfield, Esquire, fresh out of law school. The blood drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Section 4.2, I read aloud, clearly states that lake access rights are specifically retained by the mill property owner. Section 4.3 requires written permission and proof of liability insurance for any recreational use. Janet Morrison's voice came out as a whisper. But we've been paying lake maintenance fees for 15 years. Exactly. 47 families, $45 per month, 15 years. That's $380–400 collected for maintaining property you don't own and can't legally access. The room went dead silent, except for the fluorescent buzz and what sounded like Karen's heart stopping. Those documents are invalid, she shrieked, desperation cracking her voice. We have prescriptive rights, 15 years of use. Prescriptive rights require 20 years in this state, Karen. Plus, they can't be established when the property owner was mentally incapacitated. I placed Frank Hartwell's medical records on the table like I was laying down cards. Dementia diagnosis 2019. Any agreements signed after that are legally void. Board member Dorothy Rowan's face went ashen. My God, Karen. Are you saying we've been committing fraud? We've been following community tradition. Karen screamed, her composure completely shattered. Brad finally found his voice, his lawyer instincts kicking in like a smoke alarm. Karen, we need to end this meeting immediately and consult. Shut up, Brad. The venom in her voice could have stripped paint. I am not letting some blue-collar nobody steal what belongs to this community. The silence that followed was like firmament after lightning strikes when you're waiting for the thunder. Even her most loyal supporters were staring at her like she'd morphed into something unrecognizable. Dorothy's voice trembled. Karen, if what he's saying is true, we could all face criminal charges. Time for the final blow. I'm offering 2 choices. Option 1. I call the state attorney general tomorrow about fee fraud and 15 years of illegal property access. Option 2. We negotiate a new arrangement based on actual law instead of Karen's fantasies. I closed my briefcase with the finality of a coffin lid. 48 hours to decide. Karen's face cycled through rage, terror, and finally pure hatred. When she spoke, her voice was ice-cold venom. You have no idea what you've just started. This community will destroy you. Her heels clicked across the linoleum like machine gun fire as she stormed out, leaving behind the acrid smell of burnt bridges and shattered illusions. As the door slammed, I realized I just turned an annoying neighbor into a cornered predator. And cornered predators don't surrender, they attack. The next morning, I woke up knowing that Karen's 48-hour deadline wasn't a negotiation period. It was her countdown to total war. Time to build my own team. Because going into battle alone against a desperate sociopath with a law degree in the family is how good people get buried. First stop, Rebecca Rowan's office, where the smell of leather-bound law books mixed with the electric anticipation of a lawyer who'd found the perfect case. Rebecca had spent the night researching precedents, and her eyes gleamed like someone who discovered a hidden treasure map. Marcus, we're going nuclear, she announced, spreading legal documents across her mahogany desk like a general planning D-Day. Quiet title action. It's the legal equivalent of rewiring an entire house to modern code. No more dangerous jury-rigged connections. No more shortcuts that could kill someone. She explained the strategy in terms that made my electrician's heart sing. We'd force the court to officially declare what the property deeds already stated, making any future harassment contempt of court. Think of it as installing a legal circuit breaker that trips automatically when Karen tries to overload the system. Next, I needed someone who could follow the money trail. Tommy Rodriguez ran a small accounting firm out of a strip mall office that smelled like burnt coffee and righteous indignation. When I explained Karen's financial shell game, his calculator started clicking like a gear counter detecting nuclear waste. "Give me 48 hours, Tommy promised, cracking his knuckles like a pianist preparing for Carnegie Hall. When the results came back, even I was shocked. Of the $3,400 collected in lake maintenance fees, only $89,000 had gone to actual lake maintenance. The rest had vanished into a black hole of administrative expenses, including a 300% salary increase for Karen, legal fees for harassing other neighbors, and my personal favorite, $15,000 for community beautification that had somehow beautified only Karen's personal landscaping. She's been running this HOA like her personal ATM, Tommy explained, his spreadsheet looking like evidence of war crimes. This isn't neighborhood mismanagement. This is organized theft from 47 families. But legal and financial warfare wouldn't be enough against someone who'd weaponized social media and neighborhood gossip. I needed a specialist in public relations combat. Sarah Martinez operated out of a cramped office above a pizza shop, but she'd helped small businesses survive corporate bullying campaigns before. "Documentation is your superpower," Sarah advised, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. "Start a neighborhood blog called Truth About Willowbrook HOA. Post every document, every receipt, every false police report. Sunlight is the best disinfectant for this kind of corruption." The blog went live Sunday night at 11:47 p.m. By Monday morning, it had 847 views and climbing. I could practically feel Karen's blood pressure spiking from half a mile away as neighbors started commenting with their own Karen horror stories. The sound of truth spreading through social media was like watching dominoes fall in perfect sequence. Meanwhile, I was turning my property into Fort Knox, using every trick I'd learned in 30 years of electrical work. Trail cameras with cellular upload meant Karen couldn't destroy evidence, even if she found every camera. Hidden backup power systems ensured 24/7 recording, even if she hired someone to cut my main electrical feed. The gentle beep of motion sensors became my new alarm clock. Frank Kowalski proved invaluable as my intelligence chief. His police contacts revealed that Karen was making increasingly frantic calls to every government agency in 3 counties. Building inspectors, environmental protection, fire marshal. Even the health department claiming my property was somehow contaminating the water supply. Classic desperation pattern, Frank warned over coffee on my dock. His weathered cop instincts reading Karen's behavior like a roadmap map to disaster. She's running out of legal ammunition, which means she'll start improvising. And improvised weapons are the most dangerous kind. He taught me counter-surveillance techniques that would make a CIA operative proud. How to spot if someone's tailing you. How to detect property surveillance. How to document everything in ways that would survive cross-examination. The small camera in my jacket pocket became as familiar as my multimeter. Rebecca filed our quiet title action Wednesday morning. The court filing fee was $247, but watching the process server hand Karen those legal documents was worth every penny. Her face went through more color changes than a broken neon sign as she realized her husband's legal expertise couldn't save her from her own documented crimes. By week's end, I'd invested $25,000 in what Rebecca called freedom insurance, when she warned me this could take months to resolve. I thought about my Uncle Tony's favorite saying, "Good electrical work costs money up front, but saves lives in the long run." 3 board members had quietly approached me, confessing they'd wanted Karen gone for years, but feared retaliation. The neighborhood was splitting into camps faster than teenagers choosing sides in high school drama. As I sat on my dock that Friday evening, watching sunset paint the water gold, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. The calm before the storm, because Frank's warning kept echoing in my mind like a smoke detector with a dying battery. Desperate people don't surrender. They explode. Karen's response to my legal filing was like watching a wounded animal realize it was trapped. Pure, desperate fury mixed with cunning that made my skin crawl. She couldn't attack me directly anymore without risking contempt of court, so she decided to get creative. It started Monday morning when I discovered my boat dock chains had been cut clean through during the night. Not sawed, cut with bolt cutters leaving metal shavings scattered across the dock like evidence of surgical sabotage. My security cameras showed a hooded figure at 2:47 a.m., but Karen had bulletproof alibis. She'd learned to outsource her dirty work. The pattern became clear over the next week. My no trespassing signs kept disappearing or getting spray painted with messages like Community Lake for Everyone. The acrid smell of fresh spray paint hung in the morning air like a calling card. Property survey stakes I'd paid $800 to install were pulled up and thrown into the lake, forcing me to hire the surveyor again. But Karen's master stroke was recruiting local teenagers. My neighbor's 16-year-old son, Tyler, approached me sheepishly on Wednesday evening while I was inspecting my vandalized gate. "Mr. Delveo," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "I got something to tell you." The kid looked like he was about to confess to murder. Turns out Karen had been paying him and three other teens $50 each to accidentally damage my property and leave my gates open so HOA families could continue their traditional lake access. She said, "You were trying to steal the lake from families with kids," Tyler explained, his voice cracking with embarrassment. "Made it sound like you were the bad guy, but my dad found the money in my room and made me tell the truth." I had Tyler's confession recorded on my phone within minutes. Karen had just crossed the line from harassment into criminal conspiracy, using minors to commit property crimes. The metallic click of my voice recorder felt like loading a legal shotgun. Meanwhile, my blog was attracting attention beyond just angry neighbors. Local TV reporter Janet Walsh called Tuesday afternoon, asking about my property rights investigation. The panic in Karen's voice when Janet contacted the HOA for comment was audible through her kitchen window. By Thursday, Karen was calling emergency board meetings every other day, trying to maintain control as her support crumbled like a house built on sand. Dorothy Rowan had quietly started reaching out to homeowners about calling a special election to remove Karen from office. But Karen's most desperate move was playing the victim card on social media. She posted a Facebook rant claiming I was a dangerous loner who was threatening community safety and traumatizing children with my security cameras. The post got 23 likes, mostly from people who didn't even live in the neighborhood. "This man has turned our peaceful community into a surveillance state," she wrote. "Our children are afraid to play outside because of his threatening behavior and hostile attitude toward families." The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. The woman who'd been filing false police reports was claiming I was the threat to community safety. That's when Frank's intelligence network delivered gold. His contacts revealed that Karen had filed complaints with the state environmental agency, claiming my property improvements were contaminating the lake ecosystem. She'd also contacted Child Protective Services, alleging that my security cameras were being used to monitor and photograph children inappropriately. "She's throwing everything at the wall now," Frank warned, showing me printouts of her various complaints. CV investigation, environmental review, building code violations. "She's trying to overwhelm you with bureaucracy until you give up and move away." But Karen's harassment campaign was backfiring spectacularly. The HOA's insurance company had launched their own investigation after learning about the illegal lake access, and they were not happy about 15 years of unreported liability exposure. Their investigator was asking pointed questions about financial management and unauthorized property usage. The financial pressure was mounting too. 3 law firms had sent Karen cease and desist letters on behalf of homeowners who wanted refunds of their lake maintenance fees. Brad's personal practice was hemorrhaging clients who didn't want to be associated with the growing scandal. Friday afternoon brought the most revealing development yet. My contractor friend Joe Martinez called with information that made my blood boil. Karen had approached him again, this time offering $10,000 cash to accidentally damage my dock beyond repair during a fake maintenance visit. "She's completely lost it, Marcus," Joe said, his voice tight with disgust. "Wanted me to make it look like structural failure so insurance wouldn't cover it. When I said no, she started screaming about how you were destroying her life and ruining everything she'd built." I had Joe meet me at Rebecca's office that afternoon to give a formal statement. We now had documented evidence of attempted bribery, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and property destruction. Karen wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was committing felonies. As I drove home that evening, watching the sunset reflect off my legally protected lake, I realized Karen had painted herself into a corner with no way out except through me. And cornered animals don't negotiate. They attack with everything they have left. Karen's final desperate gambit arrived in the form of legal papers served at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. A temporary restraining order claiming I had threatened her safety and was stalking and harassing her family. The process server looked embarrassed as he handed me documents that read like a creative writing exercise in victimhood. According to Karen's sworn statement, I had cornered her at the mailbox 2 days earlier and told her I would make her disappear if she didn't stop interfering with my property. The alleged threat was so over the top that even a daytime TV drama would have rejected it as unrealistic. The problem? I had time-stamped medical records proving I was 15 miles away at my cardiologist's office during the exact time of this supposed confrontation. Karen had just made the fatal mistake of lying under oath about something I could disprove with documentary evidence. But her restraining order meant I had to appear in court Monday morning to defend myself against her fabricated allegations. That gave me exactly 48 hours to prepare for what would either be Karen's final victory or her complete destruction. Rebecca spent the weekend building our defense like an architect designing a fortress. When Monday morning arrived, the courthouse steps felt like walking onto a battlefield where only one of us would survive intact. Judge Patricia Brennan's courtroom smelled like old wood polish and nervous anticipation as Karen arrived with Brad and 3 witness neighbors who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She'd dressed for the part. Conservative outfit, minimal makeup, the perfect image of a terrorized suburban mom. I brought Rebecca, Frank, and a briefcase full of evidence that would either expose Karen's lies or make me look like a paranoid conspiracy theorist. Karen took the witness stand first, delivering an Oscar-worthy performance about living in fear since I'd moved to the neighborhood. Her voice trembled as she described my threatening behavior and intimidating surveillance of families. "Your Honor, I fear for my safety and my children's safety," she testified, dabbing her eyes with tissues. "This man has made it clear that he will do whatever it takes to drive us away from our own community." Her 3 neighbors repeated rehearsed stories about my aggressive confrontations and hostile attitude toward families. It was like watching a synchronized swimming routine, except instead of water, they were drowning in perjury. Then Rebecca stood up, and the temperature in the courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Your Honor, I'd like to present time-stamped security footage from the alleged incident." The courtroom's video screen lit up with crystal-clear footage of my empty driveway at the exact time Karen claimed I was threatening her. "For the record," Rebecca continued, "Mr. Delvecchio was at Riverside Cardiology for a routine appointment, as confirmed by these medical records and this receipt for parking at the medical center." Karen's face went through more color changes than a mood ring in a microwave. I watched her realize that her carefully constructed lie was collapsing in real time. But Rebecca wasn't finished. Shep presented the pattern of Karen's harassment campaign: 47 false police reports, documented bribery attempts, conspiracy to commit property damage, and systematic targeting of neighbors who didn't fit her vision of community perfection. The evidence unfolded like a prosecution case against organized crime. Joe Martinez took the witness stand and played his recording of Karen's $10,000 bribery offer. Tyler, the teenage vandal, testified about being paid to damage my property. Finally, Rebecca presented the financial fraud evidence. $380,000 in fees collected for property the HOA couldn't legally access with $15,000 of community funds spent on Karen's personal landscaping. Judge Brennan's expression shifted from neutral concern to barely contained outrage as the scope of Karen's deception became clear. "Mrs. Whitfield," the judge said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a surgical laser, "you appear to be the aggressor in this situation, not the victim." The restraining order was not only denied. Judge Brennan ordered an investigation into Karen's financial management of HOA funds and warned her about the consequences of filing false police reports and perjury. As we left the courthouse, local TV cameras captured Karen's complete meltdown on the steps. She screamed about corrupt judges and conspiracy against honest families, while her embarrassed neighbors tried to distance themselves from the spectacle. The footage went viral within hours. #Hoa Karen was trending locally by evening with thousands of views of her courthouse tantrums spreading across social media like wildfire. That night, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. The vote was unanimous: 4-1 to schedule a special election for Karen's removal, with only Karen voting against her own political execution. Her kingdom was crumbling, her legal options exhausted, her reputation destroyed on social media, and criminal investigations pending. Karen Whitfield had nowhere left to run. But I'd learned enough about desperate people to know that the most dangerous moment comes right before they finally surrender. And as I watched Karen's BMW disappear into the night after her public humiliation, I couldn't shake the feeling that her next move would be her most reckless yet. Because when someone's lost everything, they have nothing left to lose. Election day arrived like the final showdown in a Western movie, the whole town holding its breath while 2 gunslingers faced off at high noon. The community center had been transformed into a polling station, and by 9 a.m., cars were already lined up like it was Black Friday at Best Buy. 43 of 47 homeowners showed up, which was a record turnout that would have made a presidential campaign manager weep with joy. The air buzzed with nervous energy, and the smell of fresh coffee from the volunteer table mixed with the electric anticipation of a community about to witness either justice or disaster. Karen arrived fashionably late in a rented white SUV. Apparently, the BMW was too associated with her previous life as HOA queen. She'd brought professional protest signs reading, "Save our community values and stop the hostile takeover," like she was leading a revolution instead of fighting a property dispute. Her opening performance was pure theater. Standing on the community center steps, she delivered an impassioned speech about defending neighborhood traditions against outside agitators who want to destroy what we've built together. "Don't let one angry man divide our community," she declared, her voice carrying across the parking lot like a tent revival preacher. We've been good neighbors for decades and we won't let anyone stealth that from us. The problem was half the crowd was holding competing signs. HOA corruption. Karen must go. And my personal favorite, our fees paid for her landscaping. The community had physically split into opposing camps with Karen's supporters huddled near the building entrance, while my supporters spread across the parking lot like they were surrounding a fortress. Local TV reporter Janet Walsh was documenting everything, her camera crew capturing the neighborhood civil war for the evening news. This was no longer just an HOA election. It was a public referendum on corruption and accountability. The voting itself was simple, a secret ballot asking, should Karen Whitfield be removed as HOA president for financial mismanagement and abuse of authority? But the tension in that room was thick enough to cut with a chainsaw. Karen stationed herself near the voting table like a border guard, making pointed eye contact with every voter and asking about their families in a way that sounded more like a threat than small talk. "How's little Emma doing in school, Janet?" she'd ask sweetly. "I hope her college applications go smoothly. Be a shame if anything complicated that process." Frank Kowalski coordinated peaceful monitoring for my supporters, making sure Karen couldn't intimidate anyone without it being documented. The soft click of cameras capturing every interaction sounded like a countdown timer to her political execution. At 2 p.m., the incident happened that would define Karen's legacy forever. I arrived to cast my vote, walking calmly toward the community center entrance. Karen stepped directly into my path, blocking the doorway like a nightclub bouncer having a psychotic episode. "You have no right to be here," she screamed, her voice reaching frequencies that could shatter glass. "This is our election about our community and you don't belong." "Ma'am, I'm a property owner in this neighborhood," I replied calmly, my voice carrying clearly across the parking lot. "I have every right to participate in this process." "Get away from us!" Karen shrieked, actually pushing me backward with both hands. "You're destroying everything. Everything we built. Everything we worked for." The crowd went dead silent, except for the rapid-fire clicking of cameras and phones recording her complete meltdown. Even her most loyal supporters stepped back like they were watching someone have a medical emergency. Someone called 911 reporting an assault in progress, which brought 3 patrol cars screaming into the parking lot with sirens wailing. Tyranny was delicious. After months of Karen calling police on me, she was finally the one being arrested. Officer Martinez, the same deputy who'd responded to Karen's false reports about me, looked almost relieved to finally have grounds for real action. Karen's attack on me had been captured by dozens of cameras, making it impossible to deny her spin. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault and disorderly conduct," Officer Martinez announced as Karen struggled against the handcuffs like a wild animal. "This is a conspiracy. Ah!" she screamed as they loaded her into the patrol car. "You're all conspiring against me." With Karen absent, the vote counting proceeded smoothly. The results were announced at 6 p.m. sharp. 41 votesto removed Karen, 2 votes to keep her. It was a landslide that would have made Stalin jealous. 95% of homeowners wanted her gone. Dorothy Rowan was elected interim president by unanimous vote, and her first official act was a formal apology to me for months of harassment. "We want to work with you, not against you," she announced to scattered applause. "This community chooses cooperation over corruption." As the TV cameras captured my statement to their reporter, I delivered the line I'd been saving for months. Sometimes standing up for what's right means standing alone at first. But today this community chose to stand with justice instead of a bully. Karen's arrest footage and election results hit social media within hours. #HoKaren was trending nationally by midnight, with news outlets picking up the story of the HOA president who'd been arrested at her own recall election. As I drove home that night, I realized this was never really about a lake. It was about what happens when good people finally say enough to petty tyrants. And sometimes justice tastes sweeter than victory. 3 months later, I was sitting on my dock watching kids splash in the lake legally this time, while their parents grilled burgers for our first annual Willowbrook Lake Festival. The smell of charcoal mixed with the sweet scent of actual community cooperation. And for the first time since Uncle Tony's inheritance changed my life, my property felt like home instead of a war zone. The transformation had been remarkable. The new HOA board led by Dorothy Rowan had moved faster than an electrical current to repair Karen's damage. Our formal lake access agreement made perfect sense. $150 per year per family, including liability insurance and transparent maintenance funding. All money flowed into an escrow account with quarterly reports posted online. No more secret ATM machines disguised as community funds. Karen's legal reckoning had been swift and satisfying. Her plea deal required 200 hours of community service, full restitution to defrauded homeowners, and a permanent restraining order keeping her away from any HO property. The house she'd ruled from like a fortress went up for sale with a reduced price sign that seemed to mock her fallen kingdom. Brad's divorce papers had cited irreconcilable differences and financial malfeasance. Apparently, even personal injury lawyers have their limits. But the real victory was watching fear transform into friendship. Monthly lake barbecues brought families together instead of driving them apart. Property values had jumped 8% since Karen's removal. Turns out neighborhood dictators are bad for everyone's investment portfolio. The bitter irony: her harassment campaign had actually been lowering the home values she claimed to protect. My security business had exploded after the media coverage turned me into the poster child for fighting HOA corruption. Families from 3 counties called asking for help with their own Karen situations. I'd hired Joe Martinez, and a retired cop who specialized in documentation training. Business cards now read, Delvicio Security because bullies hate cameras. The Lake Conservation Project had become my proudest achievement. Working with state environmental officials, we'd transformed the old mill area into a demonstration site for natural water filtration. A $75,000 federal grant funded educational programs bringing school kids to learn about wetland ecology. Karen's fake contamination complaints had accidentally highlighted the property's environmental importance. Frank's Neighborhood Watch program had evolved into something beautiful. Instead of watching for imaginary criminals, he taught residents how to document real harassment and fight back against corrupt officials. His motto, painted on a small sign by his mailbox, read, "Sunlight kills vampires and bad board members." The Property Rights Education Scholarship was already changing lives. Our first recipient, Maria Santos, was fighting discriminatory parking restrictions with Rebecca's legal help. Watching her stand up to her own HOA, Karen reminded me why this fight had been worth every sleepless night and legal bill. Sarah Martinez and I had discovered that fighting corruption together was better relationship therapy than any counselor could provide. Her laugh still sounded like wind chimes as she helped coordinate the festival that proved communities could heal when toxic leadership got removed. As the sun painted the water gold and children's voices echoed across the lake, like a symphony of freedom, I thought about the scared, bitter man who'd bought this property 6 months ago. That guy was running from a failed marriage and a life that felt broken. This guy was building something worth protecting. The lessons had been expensive but invaluable. Property rights matter. Documentation beats intimidation. And sometimes the only way to find peace is to fight for it. But the most important discovery was that standing up to one bully gives an entire community permission to find its voice. Tonight, as families packed up their picnic supplies and kids reluctantly left the water, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: the satisfaction of work well done and battles won honorably. So, that's my story, folks. Karen Whitfield learned that property deeds aren't suggestions and harassment has consequences. But more importantly, an entire neighborhood learned that bullies only win when good people stay silent. Drop a comment below and share your HOA nightmare story. I read every single one and respond when I can. Your story might be featured in a future episode of Karen's Stories. And if you want to see more David vs. Goliath victories, where regular people defeat petty tyrants through patience, documentation, and pure stubborn determination, hit that subscribe button for Karen's Stories. Coming up next, the neighbor who tried to steal my parking spot using a fake surveyor forged documents and a legal theory that would make law professors weep. Spoiler alert, his lawyer is still trying to figure out what hit him. Remember, bullies count on good people staying quiet. Sometimes the best way to be a good neighbor is to stand up to the bad ones. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight. The gentle sound of waves lapping against my dock, mixed with children's laughter. If you enjoyed the story and want to support, you can always hit the little thanks button below. I'm slowly improving the channel, so, if you like this one, drop a kind word. It really helps keep me going. Until next time, keep your ground solid and your water clear. Thanks for watching HOA Secrets. Share this video with someone who loves a good plot twist.